He hadn't touched her in months. Not the kind of touch that matters. There were hellos, goodnights, and the occasional brush of arms in the kitchen, but the real touch, the one that says, I still see you, I still want you, I still know who we are, that one had gone silent. And with it, so had the spark that once danced between them. It didn't leave all at once. It faded like breath on a cold mirror, slowly without sound, until one morning he looked across the breakfast table and realized she was still there, but the marriage wasn't. His name was Thomas, 61 years old, married for of them 2 kids out of the house, 1 knee replacement behind him, and a retirement looming that felt more like a sentence than a celebration. The house was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that screams. He used to joke about it, how couples get boring after 50, how sex fades, how routine becomes the new romance. But now the jokes felt hollow, because it wasn't just about sex. It was about disconnection, emotional, physical, spiritual. He didn't know when exactly it began. Maybe it was the night she stopped reaching for his hand in bed, or when he started brushing his teeth with the door closed. What he did know was that he had become invisible, not to the world, but to her, and maybe to himself. He didn't want to admit it, but he had started fantasizing not about other women, but about a younger version of himself, the man he used to be, the man who woke up with energy, who made her laugh so hard she cried, who held her hips with purpose and certainty. That man felt like a ghost now. And sometimes he wondered if she saw it too, if she looked at him and missed the person he used to be, or worse, if she no longer cared. Then came the night that changed everything. She came home from visiting a friend. He was sitting in the living room, half asleep, the TV on mute. She didn't kiss him, didn't smile, just stood there, keys in hand, and said, "Do you even want this anymore?" The question hit like a blade, not because it came out of nowhere, but because he had been asking himself the same thing. He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. Nothing came out. And in that silence, she nodded, quietly, almost sadly, then walked into the bedroom and closed the door. He didn't follow that night. He sat there for hours, staring at the wall, the TV still on mute, the question echoing like a drum in his chest. Do you even want this anymore? It wasn't just about her. It was about everything. About him, about who he had become, about the tiredness that clung to him like a second skin, about the mornings that felt like fog and the nights that felt like stone. He didn't sleep, just waited for light, and when it came, something inside him cracked, not with rage, not with grief, but with a quiet, desperate hunger, a need to feel again, to try, even if it was too late. He got out of bed, walked to the bathroom, and stared at himself in the mirror. The face looking back was familiar but foreign, lines deeper than he remembered, eyes dulled by years of ignoring what mattered. He pressed both hands against the sink, leaned forward and whispered, "Not like this. I won't go out like this." And so, without knowing why or how, he began. The ritual wasn't planned. It was instinct. He stripped off his shirt, stood bare-chested in front of the mirror, and placed one hand over his heart, the other over his lower abdomen. He closed his eyes, and he breathed, slowly, deeply. For the first time in what felt like years, he listened, not to the noise of the world, but to the rhythm inside, the pulse, the warmth, the ache. He didn't move. He didn't speak. Just stood. 3 minutes, maybe more, maybe less, but something happened. A warmth spread from his chest, a clarity, a sorrow, yes, but also a flicker, a pulse of life. He opened his eyes, and for a moment he saw something in his reflection. Not youth, not sex appeal, but presence. The man he used to be still in there, faint but alive. He didn't tell her, not yet. The next morning he did it again. Same time, same place, same silence. And again the day after. He began calling it his return. Just 3 minutes, hands on his body, breath into his belly, a single whispered word. Here, he changed his coffee. Switched to warm lemon water first, not because he read about it, but because his body asked for it. He ate slower, stretched. His shoulders walked outside without headphones. Began noticing colors again. And when she walked past him in the hallway, he looked at her. Not with need, with presence. She noticed it wasn't immediate. But she paused, looked back. Their eyes met, and for a split second neither looked away. That night he asked how her friend was. She answered. He listened. No phone, no distraction, just breath. And when she got up to leave the room, she touched his shoulder. He almost cried. The ritual deepened. He added music, soft, slow, instrumental, lit a candle. Not for ceremony, but for remembrance that he was still a man, still breathing, still here. And the strangest thing happened. His erections returned, not on command. Not for performance, but in the morning, quiet, unexpected. natural like they used to be. Like his body was remembering too. He didn't tell her, she found out. On her own, one morning she walked in while he was standing there, eyes closed, hands on his body. She stopped, watched. He didn't flinch, didn't hide. Just opened his eyes, met hers, and said, "I'm trying." She walked up to him, slowly placed her hand over his, and whispered, "I see that." They stood like that. No words, no expectations. Just warmth, connection real. That night, they made love. It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't like the movies. It was better. It was honest, slow, reverent. She cried after he held her, and in the quiet he said, "I want this. I want us." And she replied, "So do I." And the ritual continued. Every morning, 3 minutes. No matter what, rain or shine, tired or not, because it wasn't just about erections or intimacy. It was about presence, about remembering, about being in the body, not outside it. He became different. Not louder, not stronger, just clearer, kinder to himself, to her, to the world. And she followed. Her laughter returned. Her eyes softened. They began dancing in the kitchen again, touching more, talking deeper, making plans. The ritual didn't save their marriage. He did, because he chose to return, because he chose to breathe, because he remembered that. Even at 61, life wasn't over. It was just beginning again. They began moving around each other differently. The space between them, once thick with silence, began to thin. It didn't mean there were no hesitations. There were. Old habits don't vanish in days. But something else began rising in there. A kind of quiet safety, a pulse of familiarity. Not from memory, but from this strange new presence Thomas was learning to carry. It started showing up in small moments. The way she lingered just a second longer when he handed her a mug of tea. The way he brushed his teeth with the door open again. The way she placed her hand on the small of his back in the grocery store. These were things they hadn't done in years. Not because they didn't love each other, but because they had both stopped showing up fully. Thomas had no idea his small ritual would bleed into every other part of his day, but it did. He began noticing how he carried himself in public. Shoulders more open, eyes more direct. He started humming again while fixing things around the house. He stopped looking at his phone first thing in the morning, and strangely, the world responded. Strangers smiled at him. A young man at the gas station asked him for advice. A barista remembered his name. He hadn't felt visible in years. But now something in him had returned and the world was reflecting it back. But not everything was perfect. One morning, about 3 weeks into his ritual, he woke up heavy, not physically, but inside. The kind of emotional weight that made getting out of bed feel like crawling through mud. The air felt thick, the silence louder than usual. His wife was already up. He stared at the ceiling and thought, what's the point? She probably doesn't even care about this change. Maybe it's all in my head. The doubt came like a fog, sudden and quiet and dangerous. He almost skipped the ritual, almost reached for the remote, but something stopped him. He remembered Elias, not a person, just a name that once appeared in a dream, a symbol, a whisper. He remembered the mirror, the breath, the words, "I'm still here." And so, with the weight still clinging to his ribs, he stood, walked slowly to the bathroom, faced himself, and did the ritual anyway. The breath was shaky, the posture unsure, but the presence was real. When he finished, he didn't feel better immediately, but he felt anchored. And sometimes that's enough. That day, his wife kissed him on the cheek while passing behind his chair. He hadn't expected it. Didn't even ask for it, but it happened. Like his body had called her, and now, maybe you're here reading this or listening or watching, and maybe something in you is stirring too. Maybe you felt like Thomas. Maybe the silence in your house isn't about sound, but about distance. Maybe you're still waking up tired even after a full night's sleep. Maybe it's been weeks or months since you last felt like your body wanted to be alive. Maybe no one knows. Maybe everyone thinks you're fine. But inside, something's been fading. Quietly, painfully, slowly. If you're here, reading this far, maybe that's not a coincidence. Maybe, like Thomas, you're being asked to choose again. Not to fix everything, not to be perfect. Just to breathe. Just to place your hands over your body, not with shame, but with remembrance. Just to stand in front of a mirror and say, "I'm still here." Try it now. If you can, stand, even if it feels awkward. Place one hand on your heart, one below your belly button. Breathe slowly in through the nose, out through the mouth. Let the thoughts swirl. Let the tension rise. Then say the words softly or boldly, however they come. "I'm still here." And if that touched something in you, even a flicker, I invite you to write it somewhere, in a journal, in a message, or right here in the comments. Just 3 words. I'm still here, not for likes, not for validation, but because someone else might read it and remember. They're not alone. This space, this video, this story is not just for Thomas. It's for you. It's for every man who thought he had to suffer quietly. For every man who thinks intimacy ends at 50. For every man who forgot that his body still wants to feel alive. And if this touched you even slightly, join us. Click subscribe, not because you need more content, but because you need more moments like this, where the noise stops, where the remembering begins, where manhood doesn't have to be hard and loud, it can be breath and heat and presence. Back in Thomas's world, things were still fragile. One night after a long day, he snapped. Nothing major, just a sharp comment about the dishes. But it stung. She went quiet, walked into the bedroom, closed the door. That old weight returned. He sat at the table, fists clenched, ashamed. But this time, he didn't spiral. He stood, walked slowly to the mirror, lit the candle, stood in silence. He didn't try to fix himself, just breathed. And after a few minutes, he walked to her, knocked on the door. She opened, eyes red. He didn't defend, didn't explain. He said, "I forgot the ritual today and I forgot myself. I'm sorry." She didn't speak, just stepped forward, wrapped her arms around him and whispered, "I noticed and I missed you." That was the turning point, because he realized the ritual wasn't just saving him, it was saving them. And maybe right now, it could be saving you too. It wasn't long before others started noticing. It wasn't that Thomas became louder or more confident in the way most people think of confidence. He didn't change his clothes, didn't buy a new car, didn't start talking about personal growth or rituals or breath work. He didn't say much at all. Actually, he just carried himself differently. There was a calm in his face, a stillness in the way he stood, a warmth in the way he greeted people, like he wasn't rushing through life anymore. And that, more than anything, began to ripple. At the hardware store, an old friend he hadn't seen in years tilted his head and said, "You look good, different, happier." Thomas just smiled and said, "I think I'm more here now." The man laughed awkwardly, unsure what that meant. But later, he called, said his marriage had been rough, that he hadn't been sleeping well, that he felt like a ghost in his own house. He didn't know why he was saying all this, just that when he looked at Thomas, something felt safe. Like maybe he didn't have to hold it all in anymore. Thomas didn't give advice, he never did, he just listened. And after a while, he told the man, "I stand in front of a mirror every morning for 3 minutes and breathe with my hands on my body." There was silence on the other end. Then a quiet, "That's it?" Thomas nodded, even though the man couldn't see him. "That's it," he said, "but it changes everything." And so the ritual began to move. Not as a trend, not as a challenge or a technique, but as a whisper passed from man to man, a secret without shame, a way back home. It reached another friend, then a cousin, then a neighbor, all in their 50s or 60s, all silently grieving the man they used to be, all believing the lie that it was too late. And one by one, they began to stand in front of their own mirrors, in the early quiet of morning, and whisper, "I'm still here." It spread slowly, quietly, beautifully. Thomas wasn't trying to be a leader. He was just trying not to disappear again. But in showing up for himself, he was creating space for others to do the same. One night, his wife told him, "You've become the calm in this house, like an anchor." He looked at her, really looked, and said, "I think I just stopped running." "From myself," she nodded. "And now I don't feel like I have to run from you." They started sharing more meals without screens, walks without phones, conversations that touched places they had avoided for years. They talked about fear, about aging, about their bodies, about loneliness, about death, and they laughed too. A lot. The kind of laughter that doesn't come from jokes, but from relief, from knowing someone sees you and still stays. One evening she sat beside him and said, "You know, I used to think you didn't want me anymore, that you were just being polite." He turned to her, eyes soft. "I didn't want myself," he said, "and I didn't know how to give what I didn't feel." There were tears, but not of sadness, of truth, of returning. Of two people meeting again in the middle of their lives, not to start over, but to continue differently, presently. And now, maybe you're still here reading this. Maybe something in your chest is opening. Maybe your throat feels tight. Maybe you've remembered someone you haven't thought about in a long time. Maybe you've been carrying weight in silence. Maybe your partner thinks you've stopped caring. Maybe you've been waking up numb. Maybe you've accepted disconnection as normal. Maybe you've started shrinking into yourself and calling it maturity. But what if it's not age? What if it's absence? What if you've just stopped showing up, not to others, but to yourself? If so, I invite you again to the ritual. No rules, no pressure, no performance. Just presence. 3 minutes. Stand. Place one hand on your chest, one on your lower belly. Close your eyes, breathe, whisper something to yourself. Anything, a name, a word, a feeling. And if it hurts, let it. If it feels silly, keep going. If it stirs something, hold it, because that's you. Underneath the noise, the man who never left, the man who's still here, and when you're ready, write it below. Just those words. I'm still here. Let someone else see it. Let another man feel less alone because you had the courage to say it. That's how this spreads, not with fire, but with breath. And in Thomas's home, the ritual became more than a practice. It became a way of being. Sometimes they did it together. Sometimes alone, sometimes with music, sometimes in silence. But always it was there. A sacred return. A reclaiming. A reminder. And for the first time in decades, Thomas began to dream again. He didn't know where it would lead. He didn't need to. He was no longer rushing. No longer surviving. He was living. Fully, quietly, powerfully. And it all began with 3 minutes. It was a Tuesday when it happened. Nothing dramatic. Just a break in the rhythm. He had stayed up too late the night before, watching something he barely remembered, numbing himself with noise. When the morning came, the alarm buzzed, and he rolled over and hit snooze. Then again, by the time he got out of bed, the sun had already climbed above the roofline, and the bathroom mirror felt distant, like a stranger waiting in judgment. He skipped the ritual, told himself he didn't need it that day, that he'd catch up tomorrow, that it was just one time. But the body remembers. That evening he felt it. A low hum of restlessness beneath his ribs. He was short with her. Not cruel, not even overt, but clipped, disconnected, floating, she noticed. Of course she did. They had grown too close in recent weeks for subtle shifts to go unseen. She didn't say anything, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Her touch was slower to arrive. Her laugh didn't come. He sat alone after dinner, staring at nothing, and the shame crept in. He had promised himself to never go back. And yet here he was, skipping the very breath that brought him back to life. The mirror, when he finally faced it, was less forgiving that night. Not because it judged him, but because it reflected him. A man who had tasted wholeness and had briefly turned away. But the ritual was waiting, quiet, steady. He placed his hands, closed his eyes, breathed. This time, the breath was shakier. The heat behind his eyelids came faster. A tear slipped down his cheek, then another. He whispered, "I'm sorry." Then, "I'm still here." And just like that, the thread reconnected. She came into the room, didn't speak, just sat beside him, slid her fingers over his, and said, "You don't have to be perfect, just present." That was the night Thomas realized something he hadn't fully understood before. The ritual wasn't about maintenance. It wasn't about staying on track. It was about coming home, again and again and again. No matter how far he strayed, no matter how long he was gone, the breath always welcomed him back. Still, not everyone understood. One of his oldest friends, a man who had known him in his youth, during the fire and foolishness years, pulled him aside after a barbecue. He had noticed the changes. "You're different," he said, not with admiration, but with suspicion. More soft, quieter. "Not sure if that's good or—" He trailed off. Thomas didn't defend himself. Didn't need to. He just smiled and said, "I stopped pretending to be okay all the time." His friend looked confused, uncomfortable, maybe even threatened. That's when it hit him. Some men weren't ready, some never would be. And that was okay. He wasn't doing this to be accepted. He was doing it to stay alive, to feel, to love, to be more than a shell with a pulse. But still, it hurt to be misunderstood. To be seen as less of a man for choosing stillness over struggle, for choosing breath over bravado, for choosing presence over performance. The next morning, the doubt returned. It always did. In waves. This time it said, "Why bother? You're not fixing anything. You're just standing there like a fool." But this time, he smiled. Because now, he recognized the voice. It wasn't truth. It was fear. Old fear. Passed down by generations of men who were taught to hide, to endure, to suffer in silence. And so, as the mirror met his eyes, he placed his hands on his body and said, "Not today." Then he breathed. 1 breath, 2, 3, the ritual wrapped around him like a blanket, warm, forgiving. Steady dat. Later that day, a man from the neighborhood approached him quietly. He had never spoken to Thomas before, just nods in passing. But today, he stopped, looked down, looked back up, and said, "My wife left last year. I haven't felt anything since. You seem grounded, like you're not fighting anymore. What changed?" Thomas didn't offer solutions, just said, 3 minutes a day. "That's how I found my way back." The man looked puzzled, curious. "To what?" he asked. "To myself." The man nodded, slowly, and walked away. But Thomas knew something had been planted, a seed. That's how it worked. Not with noise, but with quiet remembering. That evening, he and his wife danced again. No music, just movement. In the kitchen, bare feet, slow steps. She placed her hand on his chest, right where he placed his own each morning, and she whispered, "This is my favorite part of you now." That's when he realized she wasn't in love with a man who did a ritual. She was in love with the man who showed up, who chose her, who chose himself, again, every single day. And maybe right now you're still reading, still watching, still breathing, still wondering if this could be true for you too. If 3 minutes of silence could change anything, if standing in front of a mirror, touching your own body, whispering your own name, could bring you back from wherever you've been hiding, try it. Just once. Not to be healed, not to be fixed, but to remember that you are still here. And if you do, if you really do it, come back and leave a comment. Say day 1 or say returned. Or just say, still here, because someone else somewhere is waiting for that sign. That it's okay to come back. That they don't have to disappear forever. Because none of us do. Not if we choose to return. He no longer counted the days. He didn't need to. The ritual was no longer a habit or something to remember. It had become part of him, woven into the fabric of his mornings. Like the air he breathed or the skin he touched. He no longer questioned whether it was working. It wasn't about working. It was about staying, about coming back, about not disappearing again into the numb space where men go when they feel they've run out of time, or out of strength, or out of worth. Thomas didn't talk much about the ritual anymore. He didn't need to. It showed in his presence, in the way he looked at people, in the way he listened, in the way his body no longer walked ahead of his soul. He and his wife didn't talk about saving the marriage. That phrase stopped making sense. It wasn't the marriage that had been dying, it was the attention, the presence, the shared willingness to keep meeting each other with new eyes. Now, they met daily. Not with words always, but with breath, with silence, with the way she placed her hand on his chest when she passed him in the hallway, with the way he touched her back without urgency, only reverence. The connection, no longer needed maintenance. It lived on its own, because they did. Still, he remembered the early mornings, the fear, the trembling breath, the doubt, the silence that felt too loud, the feeling of being lost inside his own home, inside his own body. He remembered the first time he placed his hands on himself and whispered that he was still here. And he remembered how foreign it felt, how desperate, how impossible, and how holy. So when other men came to him quietly, cautiously, with shoulders heavy and eyes tired, he never gave advice. He only told the story, his story, and he invited them to try not to fix anything, but to return, to stop leaving themselves in the dark. Some men couldn't. Not yet. They said it was strange that they didn't feel anything, that they felt silly, and Thomas would nod gently. Yes, he would say, it will feel silly, because you've spent decades ignoring yourself, and the body doesn't open in the presence of judgment, only in safety. Some came back, some didn't, but the ritual waited. It always did, without shame, without timeline, without punishment. Thomas didn't expect it to spread, but it did, in whispers, in kitchen conversations and soft moments when one man finally admitted to another, "I don't feel like a man anymore," and the other didn't offer a solution, just stood beside him, breathed, and said, "I know." That was the ritual at work, not just in the mirror, but in the space between souls. One night, a man named Reuben, 72, retired. Widowed, stood in the circle and said, "I spent half my life trying to be what a man was supposed to be, and I spent the other half paying the price. But this is the first time I felt like I could just be, not perform. Just breathe." That night, Thomas cried, not for himself. For every man who would never find this place. For every man who died with his breath locked in his chest, his heart untouched, his body silent. But also, he cried with gratitude, because somehow, by some miracle, he had chosen to stay. And now, if you've come this far, maybe this story was yours, too? Maybe you've been floating, forgetting, fading. Maybe your mornings are heavy. Maybe your mirror looks back at you with a stranger's face. Maybe you've been waiting for something, anything, to tell you that it's not too late. This is it. You don't need to change everything. You don't need to explain anything. You just need to show up. Right now. Stand. Place one hand over your chest, one over your lower belly. Close your eyes, breathe, slowly, deeply, and say it out loud in a whisper. In your mind, it doesn't matter. Just say it. I'm still here. If your eyes sting, let them. If your throat tightens, good. That's life returning. That's the truth moving through a body that's been quiet too long. You don't need permission. You are permission. And you don't need anyone to witness this moment but you. But if you want to be seen, if you want to make this real, write it somewhere. In a notebook, on the wall, in the comments. Just say it. Still here? Because you are. Because despite everything, despite the weight and the waiting and the shame and the silence, you're still here. And that matters more than you know. And if this touched something in you, then don't walk away from it. Stay with it. Subscribe, not for more videos, but because you want to keep choosing yourself, because you want to be reminded, because you want to feel less alone. This isn't a channel, it's a breath, a place where we return, again and again, not for glory, but for truth. You are not broken. You are not too late. You are not less of a man because you've been tired or scared or silent. You are a man who remembers. And that remembrance, that presence is the most powerful thing in the world. Don't stop now. Come back to the mirror. Come back to the breath. Come back to the fire under your skin. Come back to the love you thought you lost. Come back to the man you've always been. Come back to your body, to your strength, to your softness, to your stillness, and promise yourself quietly, firmly, once and for all, I will never leave myself again. You are still here, and that's enough.